Okay, well, thank you all very much for being here. Let me begin by thanking Senator Mike Braun from Indiana for being here, Jeremy Ferguson, the president of Smart TD, Tony Cordwell, the president of BMW, Doug Vanderjagt, and Vince Verna, the vice presidents of the Signalman and Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen unions, Eric Beyer from the National Association of Chemical Distributors, and President Greg Reagan from the AFL-CIO Transportation Trades Department. Thank them all for being here with us today on a very, very important issue. We are here today. Let me go back here and mention that Adam West is a CSX worker and Smart TD member from Lafayette, Indiana. And we thank him for joining us. And Adam has been an engineer and conductor for CSX for nearly 18 years. And for 18 years, he has not had one guaranteed paid sick day. And finally, let me thank representatives from the IBW, the machinists, the firemen and oilers, and the communications union, and the rail carmen for being here as well. We are here today assembled to send a very strong message to the CEOs in the rail industry. And that is that the American people are sick and tired of the type of corporate greed we are seeing in that industry. At a time of record-breaking profits, that industry can and must guarantee at least 7 paid sick days to every rail worker in America. In the year 2023, that is not a whole lot to ask. Last year, 6 rail companies, Union Pacific, BNSF, Canadian Pacific, Canadian National, Norfolk Southern, and Kansas City Southern, made more than $22 billion in profits. They are doing extremely well. And what did they do with those record-breaking profits? Did they spend it on making the rail industry safer? And we just saw the other day this terrible accident in Ohio. No, they did not do that. Did they spend that money on improving the horrendous working conditions that exist today in the rail industry? Is that where they invested their money? No, they didn't do that. They spent over $20 billion of their profits on stock buybacks and dividends to make their wealthy shareholders even wealthier. And get this, and this is an important point to make. The $20 billion these rail companies spent on stock buybacks and dividends is $5 billion more than they spent on wages and benefits for their entire workforce. Meanwhile, at a time when the rail industry slashed 30% of its workforce over a 6-year period, the CEOs of these 6 rail companies made over $175 million in compensation over a 3-year period. Record-breaking profits, CEOs making out like bandits, workers not getting one paid sick day. Now, that may make sense to somebody. It does not make sense to me. Let us be clear. Guaranteeing 7 paid sick days to rail workers would cost the entire industry just $321 million, less than 1.2% of their profits in a single year. And they tell us they cannot afford sick days. In my view, if the industry can afford to spend over $20 billion on stock buybacks and hand out huge dividends to their wealthy shareholders, they can afford to provide rail workers with at least 7 paid sick days. And they also can afford to end once and for all the disastrous Wall Street pushed precision scheduled railroad system that has made life so difficult for workers throughout the industry. Here is some very good news, and that is a couple of days ago, thanks to the work of the people behind me and workers all over this country, CSX, one of the major rail companies, finally agreed to provide paid sick days to some 5,000 rail workers in our country. Yesterday, I sent a letter to the CEOs of the other major rail companies demanding that they do the same. Now, all of you know the history of legislation in terms of what happened just a few months ago, and that is in November. The U.S. House passed legislation guaranteeing 7 paid sick days to every rail worker in America. In December, a majority in the U.S. Senate, including Senator Braun and myself, all Democrats plus 1 and 6 Republicans, voted for this legislation. Unfortunately, the bill was filibustered in the Senate by a minority of senators and did not become law. Well, I have news for executives in the rail industry. If they think that those of us in Congress who voted for 7 days paid sick days for workers are going to forget this issue, they got it wrong. We are not going to forget this issue. Now, I hope that the companies, that the corporations do the right thing. I hope they do it voluntarily, and we're making some progress. If they don't, I look forward to seeing them right here in this Senate committee room to tell us why they cannot afford to do the right and moral things for their workers. So let me just conclude. We're making some progress. We got a long way to go. I know the Biden administration is working on this as well. But at the end of the day, in the year 2023, it is not acceptable to me and to the overwhelming majority of the American people that workers who do dangerous, difficult, and important work do not get 1 paid sick day a year off. So with that, let me now introduce Adam West, who is a CSX conductor and SMART TD member from Lafayette. Oh, no, let me introduce Senator Mike Braun. I'm sorry, Mike. Come on up here.